Thank you all for coming. It's a really rainy day, and I know some of you might have thought about not coming, but you're here, and you're going to have, I hope, an interesting experience. Now, for a period of about 11 or 12 years, my sister Bev Rydell and I conducted a series of investigations across the country, really. We've done investigations from Philadelphia all the way down to Louisiana and a bunch of places in between. But of course, our primary focus was and remains Michigan. And during that time, we would sometimes travel 5,000 to 10,000 miles every year, just researching and investigating cases of unexplained paranormal phenomena. And our most compelling cases are contained in the Haunted Travels of Michigan trilogy. And of course, I have that new book coming out I'm very excited about. Latest word is will be in November sometime, so it may not hit bookstores right away. But it's called Stepping into Darkness. It will be different than the Haunted Travels of Michigan books. And I'll share a little more about that later. But for now, we have a lesson. So take your notes. We're going to be testing you later. The first thing I'll be talking about is something called an EVP, which is an electronic voice phenomena. It is believed to be the voice of a spirit or some other continued consciousness that is attempting to communicate with you verbally. Now, the voice is so low you can't hear it with your ears, but you can record it on a recorder. Once you get back to the home or your office, you upload the audio file to your computer. You reduce the white noise. You elevate the audio. And it's then when you sometimes hear those voices. So it's an EVP. The other thing I'll be talking about is a device called an EMF meter. In the paranormal community, we use a lot of different kinds of equipment, and some of it is extremely expensive and others not. But the EMF meter is kind of like becoming the tried and true thing, an audio recorder and an EMF meter. And an EMF meter is an electromagnetic field detector. What that does, although, as you can see, there are a variety of meters, they all do one thing, and that is identify variations or variables in the electromagnetic fields in an environment. Now, for those who don't know, EMF, or electromagnetic fields, surround the Earth. In fact, it's waving right now around us right now. It's all part of us. And it's believed in the paranormal community when a spirit or continued consciousness wants to communicate with us, they will attempt to draw energy to themselves, and they do that by drawing in the electricity, and that creates a variable. And we're hoping these meters will respond to that. So when an investigator sees the EMF levels start rising, it doesn't signify a valid paranormal event. All it does is signify to the investigator, pay attention. Something could be happening. All right, so EVP and EMF. You're all educated now. What I want to do now is, for the next 45 minutes or so, take you into my world. That's the world that's unexplained. It's the world of mystery, and it's the world of the paranormal. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm simply going to share with you some of the stories I've encountered, the investigations I've been on, share some of the evidence, and you all decide for yourself. The first place we're going to is Romeo, Michigan. And I love that town. It was founded in the 1840s, but certainly Romeo has been around much longer than that. And with time and age, I believe history leaves an imprint. And in 2016, I was truly honored. The Romeo Downtown Development Authority contacted me and asked if we would investigate the town of Romeo. Not one building, not two buildings, but almost all the buildings in the downtown Main Street we investigated. And I have this incredible team that I'm so honored to be working with that helped do that. And these fine, highly experienced investigators and I, most of the summer last year, we're investigating the town. And we now host public events there from time to time just to share with people what we experienced. I can't talk too much more about that, except I am all about history. I don't care about another EVP. I literally have hundreds of them. What I am trying to do is find out if we can connect some type of recorded evidence to the history, and perhaps that one day will help us understand what's creating paranormal phenomena. Today, I'm going to share one of the stories, the interesting stories about Romeo. It's going to take us to 1910. Now, 1910 was an amazing time. It was the Victorian period, extremely conservative, extremely proper. But even in the most conservative, most proper community, there are going to be people that break the rules. There always are. And in this case, the story surrounds a lovely woman by the name of Mrs. Mary Ferguson. In 1910, she was 39 years old, and she broke the rules because she was divorced. Now, in 1910, you stuck with your husband no matter what. But her Stuart, her husband, was an alcoholic and extremely abusive, and he actually threatened to kill her on a number of occasions. So she separated from him. Now, in 1910, she had an 18-month-old baby. She had a daughter named Ruth. She called her Ruthie. And she had a son, William. They called him Willie. Mary was a washwoman, and that was back-breaking labor. Barely enough money to keep food on her table. She was really fortunate that in Romeo she had the Watson family. That was her family. That was her maiden name. And she was extremely close to her brother, William Watson. In fact, she named her son after her brother. So it was a beautiful June day. 1910, June 22nd. And William said, "Let me rent a carriage. We'll go up to Trombley's Hill. I'll take the kids up there." Now, Trombley's Hill was this beautiful park back then, about 5.5 miles from Romeo. And it was a little pond for the kids to play in, and there were walking trails. It was wonderful. And so Mary said, "Oh, that would be great if you could take the kids." And so he rented a carriage. He took Ruth and little Willie with him. When they got to Trombley's farm, though, he started to change a little, became very quiet. And he told the little boy when they arrived, "Stay here for a minute. There's something I want to show your sister in the woods." And he took her into the woods. Little Willie became nervous because they weren't coming back quickly, and so he got worried. He left the carriage, and that's when he saw his uncle come out from the woods. And there was a problem because there was something wrong with Ruthie. He was carrying her. And the little boy asked what had happened to his sister, and William just said, "Shh, she's sleeping." And he put her in the back of the carriage and took her home. Well, of course, Ruth wasn't sleeping. Her uncle had molested and killed her in the woods. He went back to the home. He told the little boy to go in the house. He placed the body of Ruth on the back porch by the kitchen, and he returned the carriage. When he returned the carriage, he came back home and he saw the women in town had already discovered what had happened, the body of Ruth. And he knew there was nothing else he could do. He knew what he did was wrong. He had purchased a gun in town the night before, and he went into the barn behind the house and ended his life. Now, the culmination of this sad and really dreadful story is actually a very charming place in Romeo called Conley's Creations. And it's a beautiful home. In fact, if you go there, you can go in the shop. It's full of folk art and some wonderful antique pieces. We did investigate Conley's. In fact, on October 8th, I was there with the group. We had a plate fly off a shelf. We actually had a few people reporting apparitions in there and voices. There was one EVP recorded. This is back in 2016. And the voice said, "Come ride with me." That could be Uncle William inviting the kids to go for a ride. It's hard to say. It's too quiet to play for you here, so I didn't include it. But I wanted to share another strange thing connected to Conley's. And that's a place called the Village Winery in Romeo. The Village Winery is a very charming looking home. It used to be the Village Winery in Romeo. They moved out. But before they moved out, the manager of the winery said this place is crazy with activity. He had wine bottles coming off the shelves. Maybe that's why they moved. There were footsteps upstairs, apparitions seen in there as well. And one of our investigators, Maria Astrop, was talking to a group there. This EVP was recorded. She's talking about Conley's creations. For your purposes as well, when I have an EVP, I play the whole clip, and at the end, I repeat the EVP portion 2 or 3 times.
The last time I did Conley's creation, and that had to deal with the murder of a little girl. So that was a sad case too.
Now, I realize some of you have never heard an EVP before. Obviously, it sounds different than our voices. I believe that says, "I loved her too." I will play it one more time. Now, what has that got to do with Conley's creations? And that's what I'm all about. We start doing research and history, and I discovered from an old city directory that Stuart Ferguson, the ex-husband of Mary, rented a room back in that period of time, and that could be him. I loved her too. He was a terrible husband, but he loved his children. In fact, he stayed in Romeo because he didn't want to leave his children. So I suspect it could have been Stuart. That's not the only mystery associated with the home where the Village Winery is. And this, by the way, is off of St. Clair Street, not far from St. Clair, which is 32 Mile Road. There's a tombstone under the house, the crawl space. The guy who owned it didn't know it until he had some contract work done. And then the contractor came out and said, "Do you know that there is a tombstone in your crawl space?" And nobody knew who it belonged to or what it was. And of course, when a paranormal investigator hears about a tombstone under a crawl space, we have to go down there. And as you can see, we're getting a little dirty. But we uncovered the tombstone. And it was a Martha S. Makepeace Giddings who died at age 23 in 1841. Unfortunately, death records that far back are not very good. We don't know her exact cause of death. We know it wasn't childbirth. So it might have been one of the other, diseases that swept through the town. I know tuberculosis. There were several others who died from tuberculosis in that area. So it might have been that. But what is she doing down there? One of our investigators did research as well, and she uncovered the fact that Martha Makepeace, her body was supposed to have been moved in 1843 when the new cemetery was open. Well, if that's true, what is she doing here? One of the mysteries of an old town and what makes Romeo so interesting. If you want to hear more of the evidence we recorded for video, there is a website called hauntedtravelsmi.com/hauntedromeo. And you can get more information there. I'm going to now take you to Waterford, Michigan. That's not too far away from here. And a lovely old home that was built in 1864-65, right around the Civil War era. And it was a bed and breakfast when we investigated it, called the Carriage House. The story is in the 3rd book, Spirits Rising. And what draws me to this is the history behind it. I told you already, it's not getting another EVP. It's finding out if we could connect real historical events with the evidence that we record. This case was extremely compelling because at the end of the night, we're sitting in the kitchen, nothing is going on, we're kind of relaxing before we go home, and this incredible little child's voice was heard. I got chills from the milk.
I got what?
I got chills from the milk. What the heck is that all about? And it's clearly a child's voice. So, we decided, my sister and I, let's see if we can trace this down. It's like looking for a strand of hair in the ocean, really. And, I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes what took us weeks and weeks of dedicated research. So, here's what we uncovered. First of all, the Tilden family lived in that home until the 1950s. Well, generations. So what we discovered is in 1893, there was little Ferdinand Tilden who died from scarlet fever. Now, the death record said he died in Detroit, so we thought there was no connection to him and the home in Waterford. But more research was done, and if you can see, I've only clipped it, but you can see diphtheria, the two children above. There was diphtheria running rampant in Detroit. Tuberculosis was running rampant in Detroit. Detroit was becoming a petri dish of infection. Now, Ferdinand's father was a pharmacist, and he knew probably better than most how bad it was. And he and his wife decided they would send the boy out to the farm in Waterford, their family home, and let his grandmother watch him. There's fresh food, fresh air. I mean, can it be any safer? Unfortunately, it wasn't. And he contracted scarlet fever at the Waterford location and died. So now we've got one piece. All right, there's a small child who had this dreadful disease, but still got chills from the milk. Where does that come from? We got the symptoms for scarlet fever. The very first symptom is a sudden high fever that racks the body with chills. So we have the chills. That still doesn't explain milk. And it took us a long time to find this. Scarlet fever from the cow. Milk wasn't pasteurized back then. And farmers would get scarlet fever. For an adult, it's not as bad as for a child. The farmer thought he had a bad cold, and of course, the farmer doesn't care about being sick. He's got to milk the cows and tend to things, so he's probably coughing in his hands, milking the cow. The virus spreads to the warm cow's milk, which is like a petri dish, another petri dish of infection, and then it goes into a bigger vat, which is distributed to the children and the adults of the community. And that's what probably happened. And the little boy, he was in the kitchen because that was the warmest place in a home back then. And he was probably hearing his father, the pharmacist, talk to his grandmother and say, oh my God, he probably got it from the milk. And so he didn't know. In his little mind, what he's thinking of is, I got chills from the milk. So I think we fit that puzzle together enough for you to see the picture. Those are the kinds of things that we really want to get. It's so important for us. But sometimes history is just lost to time, right? And so I'm going to go up to my favorite haunted island, which is Mackinac. Now, for about 4 or 5 years, my sister and I did a haunted weekend on Mackinac Island. And we would bring a group of people together, and we would do daytime and nighttime investigations. And it is crazy what we uncovered during our trips to Mackinac Island. Most of our accounts are contained in that third book called Spirits Rising. There's a whole section dedicated to Mackinac. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have been to Mackinac Island. It's a step back in time. It's a wonderful town. And when people think of hauntings in Mackinac Island, they inevitably think of the Grand Hotel, right? But they never have permitted paranormal investigations. There's no evidence. So all it is great stories, and stories can be fun, but that's not what I'm about. I need to record stuff. So as far as I'm concerned, great stories, I don't know. I don't think it's the most haunted. But in fact, what people don't realize, you don't need a building to have paranormal activity. Some of the most interesting places we've investigated is the Post Cemetery, which is the oldest cemetery on the island. Fort Holmes, and people think of Fort Mackinac, but they don't realize the second fort on the island, located at the highest point of the island. It was built as a redoubt fort, and that means it was built to protect Fort Mackinac. We've gotten crazy Native American EVPs up there, British soldiers, a number of things. And then Arch Rock. Oh my gosh, it's like an incredible spirit there. Steeped in Native American folklore. And in fact, a story in my new book coming out is going to have a story that focuses on what happened at Arch Rock. But there's other places. Let's go to Fort Mackinac. Up until 2014, they never permitted paranormal investigation, so it was like the Grand Hotel, who knows? But in 1914, we were extremely thrilled when the historic parks and Recreation Center allowed us to do the first formal paranormal investigation on Mackinac Island. And I'll never forget the first time we were there were just 3 of us. It was after hours, it was dark. The historian was standing with us in the jail, sharing a little history, and something fell on the floor with a mighty thud in front of us, and we turned on our flashlights, and there in front of us was a little penny. It was the only thing in the room. The room was completely bare, and it had to be the penny. So I picked it up, and I'll be darned if the date on that penny wasn't 1863. I know. And we looked around the room, you know, sometimes people tack coins and things on the walls. There was nothing like that. Who knows where it came from? But that certainly drew my sister and I back a few times. And last year, the Haunted Travels of Michigan group went to the fort. And what I'm going to play for you now are just a couple of EVPs we got. This comes from the barracks. Now, of course, the fort had a hospital, but the hospital wasn't big enough for all the soldiers, of course, and there were many epidemics going around. There's influenza was dreadful. They had tuberculosis and a number of things. So the hospital would only hold the sickest of the sick. Everybody else kind of hunkered down in their bunks and tried to do the best they could. While we were there last year, the EMF elevations were flipping out. They were getting higher and higher. And we thought we were communicating with a soldier who may have been injured or was sick. Well, the EVP I'm going to play for you in a moment, he's clearly sick. He's going to say a bad word, but I don't control what the spirits say. So
if you were injured, were you shot? Did you have an illness?
he was clearly very sick. The EMF levels flattened out shortly after that. We went to another area of the barracks. Once again, the EMF levels started elevating, and we caught another EVP. This is clearly a different voice, and it's quieter, so you'll have to listen very closely. The radiation meter, it just went up to 3. It's hard breathing. Another indication of pneumonia or an influenza or even tuberculosis. So if you ever want to go to the fort and you want to do your own investigation, go during off-season. The fort is always open off-season. Very few people go in the fort. Do your own session. It's incredible. I love Fort Mackinac. I can't leave the island without sharing one more thing. What they say one of the most haunted places on the island besides the Grand is Mission Point Resort. And when we held our investigations there, our haunted weekends, we would base our camp at Mission Point Resort. And I can't say it's the most haunted place, but there is one location called the Straits Lodge, which is a building away from the main registration area, that for some reason we get a lot of strange things going on there. Now, room 2200 is said to be one of the more active rooms. I'm not sure that it is, but that's the reputation. I will tell you, my sister and I, when we did our haunted weekends, we would stay in 2200. We slept peacefully. It's very comfortable. We might get an occasional EVP, but nothing too scary. Then suddenly last year when our group was around, the whole atmosphere in there was different. And a member of the group, Diane Shaw, thought she saw a shadow in the hallway by the bedroom that you can see in the back. And it was after that EMF meter started getting wacky. And one of our other investigators, her name is Sue Burt, started feeling this terrible pain or discomfort on her back. She was complaining. It's like, oh my God, let's just look at it. So we pulled down her shirt in the back, and there's this mark. And I don't know if you can see it clearly, but it almost looked like a handprint. She's been investigating for 12, 13 years, and nothing like this ever happened before. Now, what could have caused that mark? That's one of the things we will never find out. That's something we can't even research. That lasted for a few hours, and it eventually dissipated. I could stay on the island the entire time, but we can't. We got to move. We've got to travel, and we're going now back to the mainland to a place called the Terrace Inn in Petoskey, Michigan. Now, the Terrace Inn was built around the turn of the century. It was built during Chautauqua, and if there's people here who don't know what Chautauqua was, it was amazing. It was this religious summer camp run by the Methodists. Now, what made it so amazing is that the Methodists encouraged all religions to unite. Back in those days, you know, the Catholics stayed with the Catholics, the Lutherans, and so forth. But for the first time, the Methodists said, we all have faith, let's join together. And they would have these incredible camps that would, of course, have spiritual lessons, but beyond that, just pure entertainment, singing, dancing, comedians. And some very well-known people would perform at Chautauqua, and well-known people came to Chautauqua, and the Terrace Inn was built specifically to house some of the residents for Chautauqua. Now, it was one of the very first investigations that we went on, and so this kind of holds close to my heart. It's in the first Haunted Travels of Michigan book. And there's a great story about Abbey Suite that we uncovered, but I can't share that story with you, it's too long. Instead, I want to go to something else that's rather interesting, and that's the boy in the basement. And this is a room in the basement of the hotel very few people will ever know exists, because it's behind a room, behind a room, behind another room. And when we first went there, we knew there was a light flickering on and off in this room, and we couldn't understand why. And it took us a while to find the room. And at that point, we started what we thought might have been a communication with a young male spirit or entity. But we didn't record anything, and that was frustrating. So we went back several more times to the inn, and when we went back, this was in lockdown. And what that means is the inn was closed for the winter. It was winter out. So it was closed for the winter, and our group of 5 or 6 people locked the doors. Nobody could get in and out when we were investigating. So we're trying to get this kid to talk. He's still being resistant. And we found a baby carriage down there on our 3rd trip to Terrace Inn, and we put the baby carriage in the hallway, hoping that this young male entity, if in fact he's down there, because we had no formal commitment yet that he was there, we hoped he would use it. Well, it sat there 6 hours, didn't move an inch. So it's about 1:30 in the morning, we're getting tired. I go down there with a guy by the name of Dan Bruner, who's an incredible psychic medium, one of the few that I really believe in. And he starts asking the kid to move. And this is what happened.
Push that for us. Make that move. Do you catch that?
No, what do you think?
It's moving. Keep pushing it.
Push it.
Keep coming. Keep coming. That's all you got? Give it a little more.
Ooh, bless you.
A little bit more.
I'm going to lighten it up for you.
Push that for us. Make that move. Do you catch that?
No, what do you think?
It's moving. Keep pushing it.
Push it.
Keep coming. Keep coming. Is that all you got?
Yes, it is, Dan. That's all that critter has. What you can't see on that video is that it actually moved about 18 inches on the floor. And there's no windows in that area. There's nothing. It's a small little storage area. And we leveled the floor. The floor was remarkably level. And we were frustrated because we still didn't record anything to validate that it was a child that moved it. A few days later, I'm listening to audio of that weekend, and it was hallelujah, we finally got him. Now, what we found out is apparently this little spirit energy, whatever it is more responsive to males. Now, earlier in the evening, I'd left an audio recorder there the whole night, right? So about midway through the night, there are these 2 women down there from our group, and they're asking questions. And that's when we got them. You're going to hear the ladies say, we're leaving now. You're going to hear them leave, and about 10 seconds later, you will hear them.
Okay, I'm gonna
The word he's saying is fools. Now, doesn't it sound like a young guy, maybe 12 to 15 years old? He sees these two women asking him these stupid questions. He probably thinks they're foolish. And he mocks them after they leave. He's not going to respond to them. Instead, he just calls them fools. Now, we investigated the terror sins several years after that. The activity started to dissipate. Until the last couple of times we went back, nothing happened. And that's the nature of paranormal phenomena. Sometimes it's strong, and sometimes it just goes away. We have no clue why. But that was a remarkable investigation. And before I end this general presentation, I can't leave without taking you to my favorite abandoned prison. So that's going to head us south out of the state to Mansfield Reformatory, Mansfield, Ohio. And it was built in the late 19th century as a boys' reformatory. But it quickly changed to that of one of America's worst, most hardened prison. Tremendous violence. Thousands of men died there, some through prisoner abuse. And you don't realize how awful it is in there until you go there. And I will tell you, even for the most experienced investigator, going through Mansfield is an overwhelming experience. It's dreadful in there.
I've been there for their Halloween tours.
I'm sure some people have. Well, it's considered to be in America's top 10 most haunted. You're not always going to get activity there, certainly. But it does have activity. And what I want to show you now is something that happened in solitary confinement. My sister is standing in the main aisle of solitary confinement. It's about 2:30 in the morning. Someone believes they just saw a shadow going down the aisle. So we're all kind of focused down there. One of the guys in the group, there were 6 of us there, started provoking, which I do not encourage, I do not recommend, where you say things to make the ghost or the spirits angry. And he starts provoking. What I want you to do, I cut my sister's head off, but stay tuned to her back, and you're going to hear a bang. And then if you listen carefully as the video progresses, you'll hear that bang again further away.
Well, maybe you're not used to be talking to so nicely. You gotta become assholes? Treat you like a piece of shit like you used to be?
Provoking.
Are you okay?
Oh, what? I just felt something on my neck. Seriously?
Pink could have fallen. Hold on, don't move.
It don't move.
Hey, don't move!
Okay. There's some paint on the floor.
What did it feel like?
I'm not really sure, it's kind of like a pain on my neck.
Really? Yeah. Where about? Put your finger on it. Here somewhere? There.
Okay. No, that's too bright.
3 scratches. Clear.
I can get one.
Did you hear that sound again further down? What that doesn't show you clearly is that 1 or 2 of those scratches were so bad that there were little beads of blood on it. They lasted 3 or 4 days. I saw nothing. You watched the video, you saw nothing. With Sue in our group, she was burned or some red mark on her back. We saw nothing. What exists around us that we don't know? Now, to validate that scratch, we captured this incredible EVP, which I'll play for you.
Please shoot down that,
It says, "I got you." Now, I've investigated Mansfield on several occasions, and I will tell you, women especially get scratched there. So I'm not sure what the entity is. Of course, we don't see anything. But we go back to what I was saying moments ago. We don't understand so much. There's so much more we have to do to understand. And there finally is a very small consortium of well-respected, educated physicists and scientists looking at something called quantum mechanics or string theory and the possibility of continued consciousness. And the idea behind string theory, I'm not going to get all technical and you'll all be sleeping, but the basic premise behind that is there could be as many as 11 or 12 dimensions, of which we can only see in 3. So what happens to our consciousness when our body dies? Could heaven, our idea of heaven, actually be a dimension? And what other entities or spirits or other existences are in the other dimensions? It seems crazy and ridiculous, but at this point, we have to look at other ways of identifying what can't be explained. And hopefully these educated men and women will be able to crack that a little bit, which leads to the next book I'm doing called Stepping into Darkness. And that's hopefully going to come out later in November, though the publisher is telling me it may not be in bookshelves right away. But the idea behind that is we live in 2 worlds. There's the world of light, that which we know, and the world of dark, that which we don't know. And where the light and the dark meet is a slender area of gray where both the known merges with the unknown and maybe the real truth exists that we still have to discover. And every story in Stepping into Darkness takes us into that gray area. These are all true stories, some dating to the 16th century, and some only a few years old. But all of them are true, very real, and makes us realize how much in the world we do not know. I had a hard time figuring out what story to share with you tonight, but I decided on one that I call The Night Visitor, and that's because it's one that personally affected me. It was a very dark time in my life. My mother had died. And she had been my mentor, my muse, my chief supporter. It was a very difficult time. And of course, for those of you who have experienced the grief of a loved one, you know how emotionally and mentally wearing it is. And I would go to sleep in the days and weeks that followed her passing, and I would just be so exhausted, I would drop off into a coma-like sleep. And I wouldn't wake up till that darn alarm clock rang in the morning, another day ahead. I would sleep, except for one night. It was almost 2 weeks after my mother's passing. I woke up, didn't know why, it was 3:35 a.m. That immediately caught my attention because that was the moment of my mother's death. And I thought, wow. And I looked around, I listened, there was no sounds in the house, it was perfectly quiet. My eyes adjusted to the darkness of the bedroom. I could hear my husband sleeping soundly and deeply, so clearly he wasn't interfered, it didn't bother him. And I look around the room, everything is in order, except, of course, there's a sock on the floor outside of the hamper, and I'm very anal, so that was driving me nuts. And I was thinking, well, I'm not going to get up and put it in there. I'm going to leave it there. Just close your eyes and go back to sleep. So I tried to close my eyes, and I was awake. You know how that is. So I opened my eyes again, and that's when the imperceptible change began. The atmosphere around me changed. Not much at first, but it grew heavier until it was almost oppressive, like someone had put a hot, wet blanket over you. Extremely still, heavy atmosphere, and I wondered, what is going on? For a moment, I thought it might have been a stroke, but it wasn't. And my eyes checked the room out again, and the sock and the hamper. But I noticed the door to the bedroom, which I had left partially open, was still in place, just like I had left it. But I had this strange feeling there was something or someone on the other side of the door now, in the hallway. And I laughed and I said, oh, come on, that's crazy. It's just active imagination. And that's when he came in, this person, this man. The room was so dark and the man was just a shadow. I couldn't see much more than an outline. But he was crazy. I mean, he had this wide-brimmed hat on. He wore a cape-like coat, all in black, and when he walked, I couldn't see his feet, but it looked more like gliding. And the thing that was so crazy about this is he didn't come toward me. He didn't even look at my husband or I in the bed. He was going on an angle toward the foot of the bed. In my mind, my rational mind is saying, this is nuts. There's nobody there. Just close your eyes. You did this to yourself. So I closed my eyes for at least a full second. I opened them again, and he was gone. And I thought, oh, thank God. You know, good grief. But it seemed so real. And so I got up. I threw the sock in the hamper, of course. And I started turning all the lights on in the house, except for the bedroom, because my husband would have killed me. And it was perfect order. It had snowed that night, so I even started looking in all the windows and opened the doors to see if there were any footprints, and there were none. And that's when I realized, okay, it was just your imagination. And I told my husband the next day, and he laughed. And I told my sister, and she laughed, and we forgot about it. Several months later, we decided to go to the Whitney restaurant in Detroit. I don't know if any of you have been there. I love that place. And at the time, we didn't know it had a report of paranormal activity. This was like in 2005. So have a wonderful dinner. It was built, by the way, by David Whitney Jr., a wealthy lumber baron, a turn of the century. We have a wonderful story in our very first book all about the Whitney and its haunting, because it was the Whitney where our interest in the paranormal began. After dinner, we went around. My sister had a camera. She's taking pictures, right? The next day, we're looking at the photos that she took of the Whitney, and we saw this one crazy photograph. Now, I don't know if you can see in the lower right corner. Probably those in the back can't see it. I will blow it up for you. And we have this weird anomaly. And we had no idea what it was. We thought curious. Now, I had an acquaintance at the time who was a photographic forensic analyst with the FBI. And it's like, I don't know what the guy did, but he was into photographs. I figured if anyone knew how to explain this, he would. So I sent it off to him, and he said, it's dust. I said, that can't be dust. Look at that. He says, no, dust does unusual things in photographs when it's moving. And since then, I have learned that is absolutely true. Absolutely. But he did put this under some process, who knows what. He came back 3 or 4 days later and said, I don't think that's dust. And I said, well, what do you think it is? And he said, I have no clue. But it was moving at a very rapid rate of speed, because what you're seeing is the blur motion of whatever the object was. And to this day, nobody has explained that, and that led to the Haunted Travels of Michigan book series. Just something that simple. Now, our first investigation was at the Whitney, but before we even did that, my sister, husband, and I figured, we know nothing about this stuff. And there was a conference in Philadelphia who was going to have the best people, most well-known, respected people in the paranormal community talking, right? So we thought, let's go to the conference. It also included an investigation of Eastern State Penitentiary, which is equally creepy, though Mansfield is much creepier. We didn't record anything there. It was our first investigation, but it was still a great experience. Then we listened to the speakers. And anyone who's been to a conference, you know that one. Some of them are better speakers than others, some more interesting than others. But there was one person that absolutely drew my attention. Her name was Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I did not know her at the time. Since then, I've had the pleasure of speaking with her on a number of occasions. But during that presentation, she was talking about a phenomenon called the shadow people. And it blew my mind away. I'm sitting there, and she's telling me about the study she's done for several years. Around the world, there are hundreds, and she believed thousands of people around the world who have seen this phenomena called shadow people, and there are different kinds of shadow people. But the most popular one is something called the Hat Man. And this is what she said. They were seen by people dealing with or about to deal with significant emotional upheaval. My mom had just died. It's seen between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. I saw it at 3:35. This is the most bizarre thing. It is silent. If I hadn't been awake, I wouldn't have seen it come in because it was completely silent. And the crazy thing is they all do the same thing. It heads to the foot of the bed. That's what mine did. And I could feel the hair standing up on my neck and my arms as she's telling this, which is fitting exactly what I had seen months before. And now I'm thinking, what did I see? I asked Rosemary later, what is the Hat Man? What is it? And she said, nobody really knows. She thinks it might be an entity from another dimension. Well, if string theory is true, and there are 12 or 11 dimensions, maybe that's real. She believes that it is a messenger of impending life change, a major life change. And it's drawn to us from our own emotional turmoil. I don't know what I saw that night. I did my own research. I contacted not hundreds, but several dozen people in a survey, and I was absolutely blown away by the number of people who claim to have encountered the Hat Man. And you can see these clearly are not artists, but they're giving us similar renditions of what they see. And this comes from all over the country. What I want you to pay attention to in particular is this one right here and that one. Can you see it? The one on top was drawn by a woman in Nebraska. The one on the bottom is my own rendition of what I saw that night. Would you look at the similarities? What did I see that night? Oh my gosh, who or what is the Hat Man? And I've thought about it ever since. I want to believe that it was a dream. That would be much easier. I would like to believe that it is something, a projection of my subconscious. That's logical. But if that's what it is, I'm sharing this with thousands of people around the world. That doesn't even seem to be feasible, that so many of us could have the same exact dream. The hat, the cape, going to the foot of the bed. That makes no sense at all. What is the other explanation? Another entity from another dimension? I mean, I find that really hard to believe, yet what else is there to believe? To be honest with you, after all these years that have passed since my mother's death, I don't know what I saw, whether it was a dream or whether it was real. The only thing I'm certain of, at 3:35 a.m., about 2 weeks after my mother's death, I saw that Hat Man. And I hope I never do again. And that concludes our presentation for today. And thank you all for coming out. Does anybody have any questions? No? Quiet? Quiet. Oh, there's one in the back. Could we maybe turn on some lights? Oh, thank you. That, by the way, is Diane Shaw. She was with us, and Dana Shaw over there. They were with us on Mackinac Island. So who had their arm? Yes?
So with all that you've experienced, have you ever been, like, fearful for yourself? Like,
There was,
I shouldn't be doing this?
yes. There was, but only once. There was one really nice restaurant on the west side of Michigan. And I was in the basement where they had some safes that the guy collected these safes that had been broken into. I don't know why. He didn't know where they came from. He just got them at auction. And we were getting some crazy K2 and EMF readings. And I was touched on the back of the hand. On listening to the audio later, I heard a voice that said, "She's the one." And then we got another EVP that said, "Der Buch." Der Buch. It's a Jewish word. Now, "she's the one" sounded inhuman. It didn't sound, of course, EVPs don't always sound normal. But this one sounded unusual. It sounded like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. So then when we got the Der Buch, which is in the Quran, and it's a Jewish belief that there are people on earth who are so evil that when they die, their spirits cannot go to heaven. And they're stuck on this plane. and they can attach themselves to an object. Sometimes they're locked away. There's something the Americans call a Dybbuk box, which is actually a Dybbuk box, and that is a container of these evil entities. Could it have attached itself to those safes? Now, the idea is a Dybbuk, if it really does exist, waits for however long it takes. It's looking for a human vessel to attach to and drain the life from it. So, you know, not just them, but the people around them. So I don't know what happened that day. I wasn't scared during the investigation, but it was later on when I heard the EVPs that were recorded that I became concerned. So that's the only time. Other than that, nothing scares me really, you know. Anything else? Yes.
So could the evil spirits kill you if they, say, attach you too long? Could they kill you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Will they kill you? I'm not sure that that's true. I've seen no proof of it. I have investigated a demonic thing going on, Holly Demon in Holly, Michigan. It's in our second book. Nothing happened to her. I'm not even sure if it's demons or evil spirits or what we're dealing with, but she didn't die. She survived. She went through an exorcism. It was extremely difficult. The case is incredible, but it didn't kill her. And if there are deaths, we probably wouldn't know. Yes?
On photographs, sometimes I notice there's like a round circle on certain
Orbs?
people.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Is that a spirit, you think?
No. No. Yeah, let me explain, and I can't say no because everything in the paranormal is unknown. But there have been a lot of testing done, and what the tests have shown is that those little white things are actually dust, could be moisture, it could be sometimes bugs flying around. And what happens is your camera focuses on the big picture. If dust comes in front of the lens just as you flash the camera or light comes in from one of these, it can pick up the dust, and because it doesn't have time to focus on the dust, it's focusing on everything else, it blurs it out and it becomes an orb. And the concept behind orbs as spirits actually started in the early 1990s with the onset of digital cameras that were inherently flawed and ineffective. And the ghost hunters would take pictures and they'd see these little circles they didn't see. And because they really didn't educate themselves at that point on digital photography, they started this thing that ghosts are everywhere and that orbs are spirits. And since the 1990s, that belief has continued on to today. And you know, could it be a spirit? Maybe, but I doubt it. And so what we have to do to progress in this field is put aside that old stuff that we know is inherently flawed to look for new things, new ways of research and investigation. So, yeah, orbs. Yes?
What did you think of Sylvia Brown?
Well, I never met her. My general impression of most psychics, I do not believe in them. Some of them may be gifted. I've met a few that I found interesting, but they've never told me anything that I didn't already know. And my thought is, if they are gifted, could they be reading our minds, unintentionally reading our minds? It's possible. But you know, I'm a hard evidence person. I want to record it, darn it. I'm not going to believe on what a psychic tells me. And again, I know they're well loved and well respected, and God bless you. If that makes you happy, go for it. But I don't believe in them. Yes?
George Norrie kicked Sylvia Brown off of his show, mid-show.
Mm-hmm.
It was when the miners were trapped.
I'm familiar with the controversy.
And he asked her if they were dead or alive, and she said, oh, they're dead. And like within moments, it came out that they were not and that they were being rescued.
Yes.
He just terminated the interview.
Well, you know, psychics are inherently flawed if you see them live and natural, you know, other than a TV psychic, and they edit that out, obviously, to give you the best of the best. But I have, during my time doing these investigations, I've worked with many, many psychics, and the ones that gave me the best information are the ones where I knew what was going on at the location. Then they would tell me what I already knew. But when I went to a location and I knew no history, they would tell me this: there's layers. There's just so many layers. They couldn't tell me anything. So that's when I started thinking, Yes,
You know, the Mansfield prison is where Shawshank Redemption
yes,
was filmed.
yes. It has a lot of history in it. Yeah.
They give all kind of tours there.
I know they do, and they do ghost hunts too, if you have the money for it.
We waited in line 2 hours to get in for the Halloween tour.
Sure, Halloween's their best time. Yes,
Can anyone use EPV or an
EVP?
or an EMF?
Yes, we have public investigations, like with Romeo. We brought in a group of like 50 people to investigate 5 different locations, and we give them EMF meters. And if you want to bring an audio recorder, your phone, if you have a smartphone, it's got its own audio recorder. Yes, anyone can use it. When the lights start going off, it's kind of easy. When the lights start going off, it signals pay attention. So, right, anyone can use it. That's okay.
Well, most of these things that you're always seeing or hearing
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, they always seem to be early in the morning. Do you ever hear or see anything during the day? or
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. People think you have to, the ghosts only come out at night. No. No, we have done investigations during the day, in the afternoon, in broad daylight, or in someone's kitchen, and recorded stuff. We have seen things move. So it happens at all times of the day. It's just that during the day, we're usually busy. The kids are outside playing, or someone's mowing their lawn, or we're watching TV and we don't notice it. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There's somebody here. Yes.
I was wondering a couple things. Do you think that most cemeteries do have ghostly activity?
I don't know. I've investigated a few cemeteries. That's generally not where I investigate, but people say, why would they be there? Well, because their body is there. And we have been to several cemetery investigations. One was the Crouch murder, which was incredible. The Post Cemetery I mentioned here, and the Bath School disaster. We went there too. That was another terrible story. But we did capture evidence there. But every single one, I'm not sure. But they're there because their body is there. It's like, why would you be in your home? That's their new home. The thing to keep in mind is the spirit isn't body. It's not physical. So what we have found is the spirit or the conscious energy of someone can be in multiple locations. And we did an investigation, the Crouch murders again, where we went to 3 separate locations and got activity in all 3 from that person. So,
Right.
yep. Oh, sorry, yes.
I was just wondering if you believe in premonitions. And do you think certain people are more susceptible
Yes, yes.
to the spirits?
Yes, I do. I do believe in premonitions. Absolutely. I think some of us have, there's something called the third eye. I don't think it's really a third eye, but I think we are more perceptive. We just are. And I do believe in that.
My father used
I'll come to you next.
My father used to call it precognitive
Yes,
premonition.
Yes.
And, because I have it all the time.
Yes.
He had it all the time too.
it comes, it's
Yeah.
generational,
Yeah, that's,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's what he called it.
I totally get it. I believe you. Yes, over there.
Wow. I wasn't gonna get into this tonight, but.
Please do.
My son had a story. He was renovating this old house in Ferndale so he could live in it. And he started renovating it, and he was in bed one night, and he's got a big dog that's part German Shepherd, part hound. And he was sleeping, all of a sudden the dog was barking like crazy. Growling, that's okay.
Mhm.
Growling like crazy, and woke up so loud, woke him up, and he opened his eyes, and this woman came floating in the room.
Standing on the end of the bed.
Standing on the end of, you tell us.
He went to the foot of the bed?
No, she was standing at the end of the bed, and he says, I couldn't see her face, but it was like light all around her.
Mm-hmm.
And I says, what did you do? And he says, I put the covers over my face.
That's the best thing to do in something like that.
And then when the dog stopped growling, he said, I took him down.
Well, I do think animals have a better sense than we have of a lot of things that aren't around us. What he saw, it could be similar to my shadow guy. Was it his mind projecting it, or was there really something there? What I find interesting is this is a female, that it is bright instead of dark, and it was still at the foot of the bed, which I assume is the end of the bed.
Yes.
So why is it there? we still don't get it, but it's a possibility. I can't discount it. I'm glad you mentioned it. Yes.
You mentioned with the shadow guides that the man with the hat is the most common. Do
Yes.
you know what any of the others
Yes.
are?
Yes. They're in the next story coming up, but they can just be blobs. Just dark blobs that ink out an area. In fact, I've got a story in the next good book called Eloise, the Dark Things. And Eloise Asylum, of course, everyone thinks is haunted, but they don't permit real serious investigations. And most of the buildings are gone. But when I was 5, I was in college, and I was assigned to go to Eloise as part of a psych class. And I was supposed to make friends with a patient, which I did. And I watched this young man go from a relatively normal person into a world of night terrors. And what he claimed to see were these dark, inky objects following patients at Eloise. That's one of the shadow people. There are also shadow people that you can see through that have the shape of a human without the hat. There are some shadow people that have red, piercing eyes that glow. That sounds creepy. I don't know if I believe that, but it's possible. Those are just some of the shadow people, though the most relevant, the most current is the hat guy. You see that more often. Back there?
Just about a month ago or so, we went to a daytime tour of the Whitney, just a historical
Sure.
tour and brunch.
Yes.
But our tour guide, who seemed to be very, very knowledgeable, he had done his homework on the Whitney and everything.
Probably read our book.
Very possibly, I don't know. But, of course, people, were questioning, is the Whitney haunted? Blah, blah.
Right, of course.
And he came up with a picture he was showing people on his phone of a group of 2-3 people. Supposedly the picture had been taken at the bar, looking
The
down
ghost
the
bar.
road past it, and there was these people there, of course, that they said were not there, but appeared in the picture. Are you familiar? I mean,
I've seen that picture.
is that something he just pulls out to play?
Yes, absolutely. And I did see that picture a couple of years ago, actually. And what it looks like is something called double exposure, which a phone can do because they're inherently flawed. And it has a set shutter speed. So what happens, you've got someone walking by real quickly, you shoot the film, and all you do is you catch their movement. And that's what that was. Yeah. Let's go way back there.
Have you ever seen this or taken a picture of it?
Never. I have taken a picture of a mist, several. I think we can account most of what we see. One time I saw it, it was near a lake, so I think it was probably clouds coming in from the lake. The other mist that I saw was a result of teapot on the stove. So I'm not sure that I've really seen a paranormal mist. Yeah. There was one more, I think. Yes. Yes.
I'm wondering, in the countless recordings that you have, can you ever go back to the same location and get the same?
Not the same EVP, but most locations that we investigate, we don't do one investigation. We'll go back a number of times. And we've never gotten the same EVP. But why would it repeat? Now listen to this. Let's assume a spirit is like us. And you're moving through an area, hi, and now you're gone and you don't come back again. We may not be communicating with the same spirits. They could be passing through. And what the other thing is, there was a cemetery investigation I did at Bath. Bath is a terrible school bombing. A madman named Andrew Kehoe blew up a school. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but we investigated the cemetery where a lot of the children remain. We went there 3 or 4 times, never got anything. The last time we went, it was middle of the afternoon, during a time when a lot of the burials were taking place, and we got a lot of EVPs. In fact, some of the most compelling I've ever captured. Never got them again. So, yeah. Wait, there's one back here, I think. Yes.
What would make a difference in clarity when people talk about, some people will see apparitions that are more like a light shadow, Others will talk about where they can see the facial features and it
Yes.
looks like a full person. What makes the difference in how clear it might be?
That's the phenomena. It's part of the big shadow person phenomena. Some are light, you can see through them. Some are inky black. And it could be different things. It could represent different things to the person. I can't explain that. There's a lot I still don't know. Mostly I don't know. The more I do this, the less I know, as a matter of fact. So one more question? Yes.
The one where you saw the gravestone under that
Yes.
crawl space,
Yes.
do they know there's a body under there?
They're not sure.
They didn't
And,
try to dig it up?
well, it's under a crawl space. It was about that deep. So it's like they'd have to remove half of the house to be able to really get in there and dig it through. And it could be that her body was moved and they just didn't do anything with the tombstone. So it might not be anybody, but no. I'm sorry?
We live in Romeo, and that's the talk around town, is that it was never moved with the body.
Yes. And it could be. That happened often. The only thing is the family tombstone is there, and I don't see an individual tombstone for her. So, it could be they just forgot that too.
In your Romeo story, you talked about a park that the man took the children to. Is it just a field at this point now? Or?
I looked on a map, actually. There is a business sitting on it. It's about 5.5 miles north of Romeo. You stay right on Van Dyke.
Right.
5.5, you'll come to a slight hill. There's still a lake there or a large pond. But there's a business or some home that I saw there.
Romeo Glass and now computer repairing.
I think it is.
On the west side there?
Yes, that's the one.
So you should go there and investigate that.
I know, I should. There's probably all kinds of horrible things that happen. Okay, just one more and then we'll call it a night, so.
Yeah, it's probably
I was just wondering, have you investigated the Paulding light?
Oh yes, we did do the Paulding lights many years ago. Don't forget we traveled thousands of miles around Michigan for 10 or 11 years. Incredible vision. You can't even explain the Paulding lights. They do float around. They get bigger, they get larger. There's red, blue, green. In the UP in Paulding, Michigan. And you're driving down the freeway. It's a street there. It's not a freeway. You wouldn't even know it's there. There's no sign that said Paulding lights. In fact, you see a do not enter. So, we break the law. We live on the edge. We went in there and there were all these people there. So, it's like a lot of people are breaking the law. And we saw them. They come out every night, even though a lot of study has been done on that. And what I believe it is, about 5 or 6 miles up the road, there's a hill, there's a road, and every time you see a light, a truck or a car passes. So the red lights, they think, are the back lights of cars braking, and the lights coming at you are the car headlights or the truck lights. And it's interesting, but the atmosphere on that road kind of dips like this and then comes up. And what one guy was telling me, the atmosphere alone causes an anomaly there, causing them to look like they're coming towards you or away. So I'm not sure it's paranormal, but it's super cool to see. I recommend going. Break the law, everyone else is. So I think that concludes it for today. Okay, one more. That's it, I swear to God. Okay, one more. I'm sorry?
How do we get your book?
Oh, the books. The library, I think, has a couple of copies here, but certainly they're available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. I don't have any with me today, but you can get them online, and they're awesome. But anyway, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Wait. I'm sorry, what is that? Oh, wait, we have till 8:30. Does anyone want to stick around? All right, we've got a few more questions. I didn't know if you wanted me to get out of Dallas. Yes?
Okay, you had a question. So, have you ever been to Virginia City, Nevada?
I was in Virginia City. I didn't get anything.
I was just curious.
Yes, actually, my husband and I dragged my husband with me for that one. Yep. And let's see, I've been to the Myrtles Plantation. Got nothing really significant there. Oh, it's supposed to be the most haunted plantation in Louisiana. And we stayed in the most haunted room in a fabulous, the Myrtles is beautiful. We just didn't catch anything, so. What the last? Oh, the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana. Yes. Oh, I knew you were going to ask that. I don't know, Google it. Myrtles Plantation, very well known. Very, very famous.
Did you go to that house that was in New Orleans, the one with that was that crazy lady who tortured her slaves and stuff?
Oh my
I can't
gosh.
think of her name,
No, I know, Madame,
Marie or something?
right, Madame Marie, yes, no, she's a voodoo lady?
Yeah. Well,
Did
no,
not.
I don't think she was voodoo.
Okay. No, I haven't. I mean, when I was in Louisiana, we went to 3 separate plantations,
Yeah.
so I didn't go there.
I do have a question though.
I'm sorry?
Have you ever heard, I had something really weird happen.
She had a weird thing happen.
Recently.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my whole life, but my birthday's on Halloween, and I was working on this like spooky
Birthday and
voice-
Halloween.
spooky voice thing that I have.
Yes.
And I had cleaned it all up, it wasn't working and all that, and so I put it over by my TV, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden this like loud laugh that it has started. I thought, well, maybe it was my remote control for my TV, because it's not self-activating.
Right.
It's not on a loop. You have to use the remote control. So I was
mhm.
talking to my little sister the next day and
Yeah.
telling her what happened, and we're both laughing.
Yes.
And that thing started laughing.
Ha!
That was really.
Well,
it was
that
my
is,
parents.
that
I think
is
it was our
strange. Now,
parents, yes.
one thing that, it's not necessarily what happened to you, but one thing we discovered, when you have a remote control, that means there's IR lights connecting, it's currents going through the air to signal.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody else in another area could do the same thing with their TV and turn it on. In your case, it's a little stranger. I'm not sure that. And before you can say it's paranormal, you have to test it
Oh, yeah.
to see if you can do it again under certain circumstances. But that's unusual. That's a good one. I'd be curious about that. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to investigate the building behind the Grand Hotel?
The building, there's a couple of buildings behind the Grand. Which one? Which one? I don't know. They're both old to me.
I met somebody that said they saw something in there.
There's a lot of reports of sightings, but the Grand Hotel and its surrounding properties, they normally do not permit investigations. So I know, but they have very, very expensive rooms, and they're afraid they're going to scare their guests away.
What was her name who did the movie there?
Somewhere in Time?
Yeah, what was that?
Somewhere in Time. I don't know. I don't know her name, but it was a good movie.
Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour. Okay. All right.
There's a fountain up there dedicated to somewhere up there.
Yes, yes, very much so. It's a beautiful area. Val, yes?
I had a home I lived in which was haunted.
Mm-hmm.
And there were many, many people that would come in to the house and hear.
Was it old?
It was built in pre-World War II, 1930s.
Okay.
And it was a 2-level. And we never heard anything until after I put furniture in the 1-bedroom.
Okay,
And we could
interesting.
hear the ghosts moving the furniture
It could have been something connected to the furniture.
It was all new furniture.
Okay.
But we never saw it. We'd go upstairs to catch it, but everything would be in place. And
Right.
The noise would be gone, but as soon as we went back to the main floor, we could hear it. Every
Yeah.
sunny day in the afternoon, it would happen.
You'd have to be there and hear it, because there could be a logical explanation. A lot of times we see things or hear things, and because we don't understand it, we jump to the conclusion of paranormal, which it could be.
This was about 10 years worth of noise.
Right, but I mean,
would hear
here's,
it
I had,
once or twice a week with
let me explain one situation. A woman had things flying off her pantry for years. They would just fly off her pantry, and she said her pantry was haunted. And she said, I can't stand it, it's so much noise. So I went to the home, and I looked in the pantry, and I saw a couple of things right off the bat. Her pantry shelves were packed. And the door to the outside was right there, and when someone came in, they'd slam the door, something would fall off. But she didn't know that. She didn't think about it. I had a woman that had strange knocking in her house. It was terrifying. She said at night she couldn't sleep because there was pounding. I went there, it was the pipes in her house. And in the winter, they expand and contract. And it was a new house, and it had been going on for years, and she swore her other house didn't have that noise. It probably didn't, but this one did.
This noise was definitely sounded like furniture.
Yes,
Okay, 'cause
yes, and it could
we
be.
never saw it, but
Right.
I had 3 children in the house one time.
Uh-huh.
And the children went up there to play, and they came running down and had never known anything about me
Sure.
knowing that it's saying it was a ghost.
Yes,
And they had seen the old lady, they said.
yes.
Old lady's in that room, and we don't want to go in there anymore.
And it's possible there could be something in that room. There's something called residual haunts, which means there's nothing intelligent to it, but it keeps repeating something that happened in time. And it could be you're putting the furniture in that room, stimulate a residual haunt.
I had to have a psychic come and cleanse it.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Yes,
I'm a grandmother,
yes.
and one thing I notice is that my grandchildren, I'm the first one that ever hears my grandchildren start to speak. And it's because I naturally can put the blanks into what they're saying. When children start to speak, they may not put the pauses in. People can't hear the pauses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering if you have grandchildren, and have you noticed that you can hear like their speech before other people, like even their mothers?
I can't help you, I'm not a grandmother. But I'm sure you've got a special sense. I do believe people have senses, a connection. And so maybe, is anybody a grandmother here and can say, yes, that's true? Is it true? Can you hear your, yes? See, you're validated.
Somebody else can.
You're validated. Yes,
I always hear about old spirits,
yes,
history.
yes.
Is there any new spirits?
Yes, in fact, in the new book, one of the craziest investigations I've ever been on was in a very upscale neighborhood. The home was less than 10 years old, and it was the craziest report of some pretty violent poltergeist activity, which means things were being torn, moving around. Brand new home. Check the land records. There was nothing but a farm on there before, but we solved the case. That's in our next book. But yes, it doesn't have to be old. It can be brand new. Of course we solved the case. Come on, So, yeah, it can be brand new. Yes?
Is Old Presqu'île Lighthouse in one of your books?
We investigated that. I'm trying to think, did we put it in? No, we only have Seshwa Point. We did investigate Presqu'île. There was the old and the new. We did both of them on several occasions. We really never got anything at that lighthouse. So it's got a great story behind it.
Oh, yeah, the lighthouse keeper will let you know.
Sure. Oh, they love their ghost stories. I know, it's awesome. Okay, Seshwa Point, I can tell you we've investigated many lighthouses. Seshwa Point is the only one I've ever recorded anything that blew me away.
Where is that at?
It's in the UP, it's on the Lake Michigan side, the southern side. If you come up over the bridge, I can't remember the town, but if you come up over the bridge, you'll go to the left for about a half hour and you'll come to Seshwa. And the story behind that is the captain, one of the lightkeepers, he was a captain, and they think he haunts it. I don't know if the captain does, but I know one of the lighthouse keeper mother-in-laws is there. She died there during a terrible storm. And we actually held an entire conversation. I didn't know it at the time, but she told me the moments of her death up to the point that it was a terrible storm and it was freezing cold, and in fact, that's how she died, in a terrible ice storm on the lighthouse. So that's the only place we recorded things. No, but I've been to Presqu'île, the old and the new, a couple of times. Yes?
What's the oldest encounter that you've had? Overseas or
The oldest encounter?
How far does it go back?
A haunting? That's a good question. Most of the investigations, Mansfield, I guess, but I haven't really investigated too many places that date back to the 1700s. Romeo dates to the 1840s, and we've recorded things there. But I've investigated a lot of things on the, well, not a lot, some things on the East Coast. I've been to West Virginia. I've been to Kentucky and investigated some old things, but most of them don't date beyond the 1800s.
That's like Europe.
I haven't been to Europe, no. Fort Detroit, you mean Fort Wayne in Detroit?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's in our first book. And I know that have lots of reports of hauntings of Fort Wayne. When we did it, we were there for 40 hours. We slept there and went back several weekends in a row. It has very little paranormal activity when we were there. We recorded one EVP. It was an officer's quarter, 2 EVPs. One was in the officer's quarters, which they don't let people go in anymore because it's too dangerous. It was dangerous for us too. There was no floor in it. And then there's the upper floor, the very top floor of the barracks. This is another place they don't let people go. And it has names of soldiers etched in the walls up there that date back to the 1800s. And it was there that I got a deep breath while I was up there by myself. So.
They say the jail is really haunted.
Oh, I know. A lot of people say stuff, and it might be. I can only share with you what I encountered. I've been in the jail many times, late at night, like I said, 40 hours. And I never recorded anything significant in the jail. But I know a lot of people say it is. I haven't.
I just wondered on Mackinac Island, did you get any EVPs of French or Indian?
French Canadian on a back trail about 2 miles away from town, and it was a little dirt trail. And we encountered French Canadian voice. It was a man and a woman. And I don't know French Canadian, but I have a friend who speaks it fluently. I sent him the EVP, and he said, it sounds like a man saying, "You're so beautiful, I am overwhelmed." I wish some guy would say that to me at some point, So. Yes, yes.
Obviously, in the things you've shown us, you've had things that have either moved or touched somebody or done things. Is there any scientific evidence to show how something that you can't see is able to do that?
No, I was talking about quantum theory and string theory. That is the only possible explanation, things we cannot see in our dimension. I suppose like the red mark on the back could have been induced by that woman, by Sue. Except she wasn't afraid at the time. She's done hundreds of investigations too. We were sitting in a really nice room. It was comfortable. Why would that time it burn her and never before when she may have been in a creepier location? So I don't know. There's so much I don't know. So much.
Different spirits.
Well, possibly different spirits, yes. Back there.
Have you done any investigation in Standish?
Standish, Michigan. I'm trying to think. It doesn't come to mind. I might have. Again, over the last 10 or 11 years, we've been in literally hundreds of locations. It's hard to remember. It doesn't ring a bell, though.
When you said West Michigan, you didn't mean Marshall, did you?
No, we didn't mean Marshall. We did go to Marshall last year, and we got some crazy stuff there last year. Yes?
So, when you're doing an investigation, you just run hours of tape and then go back and listen to them when the noise comes?
Oh, yes, we're just...
You don't know when it's recording that you're...
Well, we do have recorders with us, and then I also will position audio, they're called stationaries. So I have at least one in my hand. Other investigators may carry their own, and you move with it, but then you do have stationary.
But you don't know you're getting any voices till you go back to listen.
Exactly. And you think that's not boring? Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
How difficult is it to remove the white noise?
It's not too hard with the right software. They have a noise reduction, so it's just sliding that bar ever so slightly. Back there?
Kind of an offbeat question, but how do you get
Hello?
funding for all this? Is this all self-induced funding? or-
Self-induced funding. Yes, I'm a wealthy person. No, it's been a financial, it's not a hardship. I mean, I'm not destitute, but it's just, I make my money from selling the book, from speaking engagements, and I host events, though God knows I don't make much from that. So, book sales and speaking engagements.
So like the events you hold in Romeo, we pay a little bit because
Most of that went to the DDA.
That's what I heard.
Yeah,
I know
most
you
of
did
that.
a friend of ours, neighbor on Hollister. I think, didn't you guys do that one?
I don't think so. I've been contacted by somebody on Hollister to investigate.
Definitely. I mean, the ghost hunters have been there. It's,
Okay.
we've actually, my friends have witnessed it through the windows. It's been that crazy.
Sweet. Well, I hope we get to go in there. Yes, the person has been contacting me, so we'll see. I've been too busy lately to go, but after, Halloween is over, I'll have more free time. Yes, this lady's had her arm up for a while.
Two questions.
Sure.
The first one, just real quick. The Romeo tour that took place last weekend, were you involved in?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, I just read that there had been some.
Oh, you read? Oh, she read it.
Something on Facebook.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah.
And then my other question is, have they ever done anything around Greenfield Village?
Oh, I know. I got that close to getting our group into Greenfield Village. They have to approve it from the board, and I lost by one board vote.
What about
But-
our historical village in Troy here?
Oh,
I would love to do, I've personally been trying to get Troy Historic Village for a while. I
They
haven't
said-
tried in the past couple of years, but I'm gonna try again.
That's great. I'd love to get in. That's Diane. She's with Haunted Travels of Michigan. So I think there was somebody else. I'll come back over here.
I just want to know how long you've been doing this.
About 12 years. Yeah, a long time. Yes.
Have you investigated the Freedom Tunnels in Detroit?
The Freedom Tunnels?
For slaves to.
Oh, the Underground Railroad? No, not in Detroit. They're underground. Have you been to the salt mines?
No, not yet.
Woohoo! No, I haven't been there. I'd love to, though.
The salt mines?
Oh, you don't know about the salt mines? It's under the whole city of Detroit. Awesome. No, but I want to go.
There's also mines up in like Houghton, and they, at least a few years ago, you could visit up there.
That would be cool. I'd do that. I would do that in a heartbeat.
Kind of mines.
Copper? Yeah.
Add it.
Agate and copper, yes.
Add it. A-D.
Oh, add it. Yeah.
It goes to the side of the hill.
I've been into a few mines,
Who's there?
but not in Michigan. So,
And
yes.
Iron
When you're
Mountain.
recording, do you be quiet so that you don't speak over these voices?
Yes. Well, you ask a question and then you try and wait 10 to 15 or 20 seconds in between questions. So you allow the entity or the consciousness to respond, yes. But sometimes they talk right over you, like, I got chills from the milk. We weren't asking any questions. Some of the best EVPs are recorded while you're just talking. And it draws out the energy, perhaps, normal conversation. We were on Mackinac Island, and one of the investigators, Maria, was saying her husband had gotten pizza, and he wasn't with us, but he had contacted her and said he was getting pizza, and she said, oh, I love pizza. And we got an EVP that said, make mine with cheese. Go figure. I know, it's crazy, So we'll go back there.
Have you been to Point Pleasant, West Virginia?
Which one?
Point Pleasant, West Virginia?
What's there?
It's a home Mothman, and there's this Lowe's Hotel that's on it.
No, I haven't been there. I've been to West Virginia Penitentiary, and I've been to the large mound that's across from West Virginia, and one other location, but I can't remember where, but I haven't been there, no. Yes?
What about the Henderson Castle?
I've been there. We did an investigation. It's an incredibly beautiful place. It's Kalamazoo area. It's a beautiful area, but we just didn't record anything there.
Well, it was interesting. I was there a year ago with some friends, and one friend was trying to, we were doing a tour.
Yes.
Walk out the door.
Yes. It wouldn't open? Well, that's a sign you have to stay.
It's a sign I'd be gone.
I'd be gone, yeah. Yes.
What made you get started in doing all this?
It was the photograph we captured at the Whitney restaurant, unknowingly.
It looked like a dog face almost to me.
Yes, I thought so too.
A lot of people have different interpretations of what it looks like. To me, it looks like a tornado on its side because it has a vortex in the middle. And that's why the guy who analyzed it said it looked like it was spinning. He didn't know what it was, but it was moving at a rapid rate of speed. craziness.
Have you been to the Winchester Estates?
I was, but I was there in my 20s when I wasn't ghost hunting, so it was incredible, but I don't know if it's haunted. Okay, time, yeah.
To the Auburn Hills Library.
No, thank you. I've spoken there. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
From Fresno